We are in the Gemara and Daf Ches. And today's shir is again for the refuah of Zev's mother. Okay, so for 4 weeks now, the Gemara is trying to figure out why does the Torah need to tell us that an erva does not do yibum. After all, there's no reason I should assume that an erva can do yibum, because even though we say in general asay dochalos asay, that a positive command and a mitzvah is going to supersede a negative mitzvah, halos asay, but that's only true in regular mitzvah, but not halos asay sheyesh b'kares. Not halos asay that that is to the level of kares, which is erva. Every erva is a los asay sheyesh b'kares, or almost every erva. So we try different things, and the Gemara now is going to say that I may have thought, and Gemara said really at the end of yesterday's Gemara, last week's Gemara, that hoil v'ishtari ishtari, meaning that since really every Eshasach, every brother's wife, which is what Yibum is essentially an erva, and the Torah permitted that erva. And since the Torah permitted that erva, it should also have permitted any erva with it, because we say a concept of hoil v'ishtari, ishtari. Since something is permissible, other things that are also going to coincide with that are going to be permissible. So we're going to have to look at that concept. Why do we say hoil v'ishtari, and where do we say hoil v'ishtari? But the Gemara asks on itself, and that's the beginning really of this Gemara, that Ula compared it to a case of tzaras, where a person is tamei in tzaras, so he's not allowed to come into the Beis HaMikdash for 7 days. The last day of the 7 days, when he finally is allowed to come in, so the Torah says when he comes in, even if he is tamei with another tumah as well, such that he has carry, so he's tamei, and that tumah would not end until that night. But to be for the tzaras, he's going to have to bring his korban, and when he brings his korban, he's going to become tamei for that. So that halacha says that hoil v'ishtari, ishtari, since he's tamei for, since he's allowed to come into Beis HaMikdash to get his tahara process by getting blood on his thumb and his toe, which is the tahara process for tzaras. Since he's allowed to do that, he is also allowed to. He's also allowed to. He's also allowed to do tumah, get past the tumah of hayaki. He's also allowed to get past the tumah of his own tumah of keri. So that's hoil v'ishtari ishtari. Since a mitzvah is allowing you to get past something, so other similar type of prohibitions also you're allowed to get past. So Gemara says, how can you compare that? Me dummy. And here really, this is the crux of what I want to look at a little bit over here and try and understand this order, what the Gemara say. How, and this is where we begin Daf Ches. Where there was a mace, the person, so we have two brothers, right? Every yibum is you have two brothers. One dies and one survives. In our case, we have a double erva here, right? We have the regular erva, which every yibum supersedes, and that's the erva of where the deceased brother, the surviving widow, really, who is yesterday prohibited to the surviving brother, today is a mitzvah to the surviving brother. So that erva now goes away. We want to say, well, what happens if she's also a relative another way? How? because the surviving brother's wife is her sister. That means two brothers marry two sisters. And then one of them dies. So this sister-in-law is a sister-in-law two ways. She's a sister-in-law through the brother's wife, and she's a sister-in-law as the wife's sister, right? She's a double sister-in-law, right? We get the case? Two brothers marry two sisters, one brother dies. The widow is a sister-in-law and therefore an erva as the brother's wife and also as the wife's sister. Yes? Any nods? So again, Reuven and Shimon marry Rachel and Leah. Okay? Now, if one dies, these two are the erva. This is the wife. This woman, the surviving widow, is an erva both as a brother's wife and as the wife's sister. So that's a double erva. And we want to say that should also be permissible, since the brother's wife, which is the mitzvah of Yibum, is permissible. So then the wife's sister also should be permissible. That's hoyel v'ishtari. If you're permitting, the mitzvah's permitting erva, it should permit this as well. And the Gemara says that's not going to be similar. Why? Tainach, it would be okay. Heicha denasa meis. The dead brother, the deceased brother, first got married to Rachel. And then the living brother married Leah. The surviving brother married Leah. Therefore, by the time he married Leah, Rachel was already his sister-in-law and already prohibited to him. So him marrying Leah, Rachel's sister, is adding a prohibition on an original prohibition. Again, so we have Rachel, the surviving widow, is already a sister-in-law, already an erva, and on top of that, when he marries Leah, the sister, she is again a sister-in-law. So that's a second erva. There we can understand that by the time when this erva becomes permitted, when the achos isha, when the eshesach, when the deceased brother dies, at that moment his wife becomes permitted, and that's the original prohibition. So any prohibition that came after that will come along. That's the Gemara's argument. Two brothers. And we have two sisters. All right? And these get yarmulkes. Okay, two brothers, two sisters. And they marry. So this is the mace. The dead brother, and this is the living brother. Sorry, the living life. That's supposed to be there. Okay, they're both going to stay alive, and he's alive. So if they got married first, so this woman is his erva immediately, and erva as his sister, his brother's wife. Then, secondarily, after this already is there, they marry. She was already his erva, but now becomes another erva as his wife's sister. Fine. Now, when he dies, and Yibum, so she now comes up here to Yibum to him. The original erva was the erva of the brother's wife, and that erva is the mitzvah of Yibum. So the Torah makes that permissible. When that becomes permissible, this relationship, the relationship of the wife's sister, also should become permissible because that happened after. However, if this marriage happened first, and so she was a relative first as the wife's sister, and only after did the deceased brother marry. So when he dies, his relationship goes away, and that erva goes away, but this one remains and was there originally. So it shouldn't have hoil v'ishtari. Once it became permissible because this one was there first. That erva was there already beforehand. Anybody get that? Or it needs better pictures?
I understand the picture. I don't understand what the order, what difference the order makes. If we're saying that yibum can matter Eishes Ach, and therefore we're already matting as many asurim as we want to, what difference does it make? Meaning he dies, that issue doesn't go away. Sorry? I'm saying if the brother dies, that issue doesn't go away. So the way I understood what you were saying is it sounds like that when the brother dies, so that issue goes away and the original issue of Achos Isha is left. But it doesn't go away.
Because that was that was there already before this relationship came in. So when this one goes away, why should that permit something that was there beforehand? If you want to compare it, it's only going to permit something that came after. So since this was the primary prohibition, so when that goes away and becomes permissible, so it'll take along with it the other prohibitions. And we'll talk a little bit about why that may or may not work. But why would it go the other way around? When this prohibition was there beforehand and this came on top of it, so it went away, how would it have the strength to take away a previous prohibition? So that's the case the Gemara first says, okay? So the migu the ishtari isa ishasach ishtari nami isa achosisha. That once this prohibition goes away, which is the brother's wife, and that's a typical yibum. Also, this one that came later, this relationship will also go away. So this woman now becomes permissible to this man in spite of this relationship. So even the one that came later will also go away. But if it came the other way around, it shouldn't. Since this prohibition was first, it cannot go away. And then the Gemara says, and even more so. And even if this marriage came first, now the Gemara says, I want to take it one step further and say that even this is not enough to say it's permissible. Because the prohibition, this relationship, this prohibited relationship came before the mitzvah of Yibum. Rather, the Gemara says the only way this would really work is separate them, that they were never married at the same time. Ruvain marries Rachel. This is the first relationship. Ruvain dies, and she is now permissible. So this is now his mitzvah yibum. It's now his yavama. I don't know if you can see that. It's now his yavama. This is permissible. And now, instead of doing yibum, he first marries this woman. The sister of his brother's wife, of his deceased brother's wife. Since this was already permitted, she was already permitted, and not only permitted as a mitzvah, the Torah says, I want you to do yibum to this woman, meaning I want you to marry her. So now, perhaps this prohibition coming this way would not take effect. That's what the Gemara is saying. Because that's what happens by the Metzorah. What happened by the Metzorah? The Metzorah, he was Tameh for 7 days. He's on the 7th day of Tahara, and he's going to the Beis HaMikdash now to complete his Tahara. So he's already in the place where he's allowed to come into the Beis HaMikdash. He's allowed to come into the Beis HaMikdash and says, okay, even though I still have Tumah for another few hours, the Torah says on the 7th day, since I've already done some of the Tahara process, I can come in and bring my korban. Once the Torah says I can do that, if I now become Tameh in a secondary Tumah, carry whatever it may be, I'm allowed to continue with my heter of going into Beis Hamikdash. But that's because I already had a moment of heter to go to the Beis Hamikdash. Other tumah will not block me. Other tumah will also be permissible. Same here. If there's a mitzvah of yibum, so then that will remain permissible even though he married her sister. Did I lose everyone? Good? Thank you. Okay. So that's the Gemara's case. So
what's the logic behind saying that since there was a time when it was mutter, so the Isser never kicks in? Because couldn't you say that really the opposite makes more sense, that if you have two Isurim that exist at the same time and one is overridden, so once one is overridden, then the other one can be overridden at the same time. But if the second Isser didn't exist when the first one was overridden, then how does that become overridden?
Good question. So the way Rashi and the Rishonim say is that the concept is this. Really, who tells you that the prohibition should be overridden? Maybe the Isser should prohibit both. It's only because you're already in a state of mitzvah, in a state of heter. Therefore, we say the Torah there's an Isser erva. It's the same type of prohibition. It's an erva prohibition. And the Torah said, yeah, I want you to do the mitzvah in spite of the prohibition. Therefore, even though another of a similar type of prohibition comes, the Torah is going to say, yeah, but the prohibitions didn't stop this mitzvah. Since the Torah allowed one prohibition in order to be able to do the mitzvah, it'll allow others. But you already have to be in the mitzvah. When you're not in mitzvah yet, one second, Aki, if you're not in mitzvah yet, and the Torah, and the one prohibition is there, so what that one went away? The other one is still there, so you still can't do the mitzvah. It's only when the Torah already allowed, so this relationship didn't happen yet. And then he died. So therefore, the mitzvah of Yibum is there, meaning the Isser Erva, the first prohibition of Erva, has already gone away. Once the first Erva went away, now you want to bring another Erva on to block it? We say no. That can't happen because there's already the Torah already said that in spite of prohibition, do the mitzvah. And therefore, you can do even if more similar prohibitions come. You get it?
Is there any issue of marrying the second sister in the first place while the first one's his Yevama?
Yes. Great. I'm just about to throw that wrench in. Thank you. But before we go, Aki.
So just one nuance about the way you're saying it, that, and the way Max posed the question is, you're in a state of heter, but actually I think it's stronger than that. You're in a state of chiyuv, right?
Yeah.
You have a state of chiyuv. You have a chiyuv to perform yibum, and that's what is overriding the initial erva, and that's different than saying, oh well, cancel, let go. It's now mutar. It's not only mutar. It's chiyuv.
Right. Correct.
That's a different balance of forces, I guess is the way to say it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I stand corrected. The point is that the mitzvah, the obligation supersedes one erva, and therefore it says the same would be true for the other erva, that the other prohibition will also be permissible so that you can do the chiyuv. Right. Yeah, good point.
My point is that I'm responding to Max just from my understanding with respect. That's why it doesn't generalize to heter and this heter and that heter. I don't know. It's just my thought.
Yeah, thank you.
So if both Yisurim existed at the same time, then you would say that there never was a chiyuv, or that the chiyuv never really took hold the same way. Correct. If there's still that other Isser that it doesn't override.
Right, because there's no mitzvahs yibum on an erva.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no mitzvah yibum on erva, but here where there's already erva hutar, erva became permitted for the mitzvah, for the chiyuv. So therefore, other ervas that try and come and block that now are going to also be permitted, and therefore the chiyuv is meant to be done. So we have over here this woman who is the widow of the deceased brother, who really, at this point that the deceased brother is gone, is really related to the surviving brother. How so? Because we explained there's a concept of zika. Yibum works with zika, meaning the transfer of the deceased brother's marriage to the surviving brother. And if there's a surviving brother that the marriage passes on to, so that's called zikas yibum, the passing over, the obligation to do the yibum, and therefore he is really to some degree related to this woman. And if they're related so much to this woman, how can he marry her sister? He's marrying his betrothed, let's call it, his betrothed's sister. And that's called achos zekukaso. And the Gemara later says there's a prohibition of marrying achos zekukaso, the sister of his zika. The sister of this woman and his zika. So again, if you remember, when this fellow dies, his kiddushin passes over to surviving brother. This woman is now, in a sense, married to a certain degree, has a relationship with him, and he's going ahead and he's marrying her sister. How does that work? And the Gemara tells us later it's prohibited. So that's the Tosfos Yeshonim's question here. And the Tosfos Yeshonim says, well, this is an Issa D'Rabbanan. This isn't the Issa D'Oraisa. We're going to have to understand, according to Tosfos Yeshonim, why not? If Zika is the D'Oraisa, that's passed on, this marriage gets passed on to the brother, why is that not an Issa D'Oraisa? Why is it Issa D'Rabbanan? But he holds that it's Issa D'Rabbanan. That's the Tosfos Yeshonim answer. And the Meiri says a different answer. He says that it's actually 3 brothers.
That was my next question.
Yeah.
My next question, there's another brother. The Zika is not complete.
Yeah, there's another brother here, right? So either one of them can actually get that wife. So that's going to take a little bit of clarity to understand. So what's the relationship here, bichlal? So how does, if there's another brother, why is that even permissible? What yibum? Why does that happen? So
why is it a problem if what he did is an Isser D'Oraisa? Because even if marrying that his Yevamos sister is Usser, then you could still say that the Torah needs to tell you not to do Yibum with the original Yevama. Like just because he did an Isser, you could say the Pasuk's telling you the B'diavad, if you did this Isser, I mean, why does that preclude it from being the case that we're looking for?
I missed the question.
Or why you need the Pasuk?
Again?
What's the problem if it's Usser? Why is that a problem?
Then I don't need a special teaching the Torah to say, oh, don't do Yibum to an erva. That's obvious. Why would I think you could?
I thought he's asking about whether or not, I thought he's saying that we're talking about whether it's Usser to marry the Yevama's sister.
No,
right?
He's asking, how did he even do that? The
right, so why is it a problem?
Scenario is where after he died, and there's a Yibum obligation, then he married the sister. And the question is, can he do Yibum? And the Torah says, no, you can't, because even though it should have permitted this, it won't. He's saying, wait, how does he even marry that woman? So the Torah is telling me in the case that he did an Aveira and he married someone that he's not allowed to marry? Is that what?
Well, Max, because if there was...
Why is that a problem?
if there's a Zika with the Yevama, then it would be usher for him to marry the second sister.
Max is asking, so what? So maybe the Torah is telling us if he did this Avera, he still can't do evil. To say that the Torah is coming to tell us that I may have thought there was a permission to do Yibum when there's this erva, secondary erva that came along later. That's the one case where he transgressed, he did an Isser and married someone he's not allowed to marry. That's where the one case that I may have mistakenly thought he's allowed to do Yibum and he's not allowed to, and the Torah needed to tell me that. No.
You just froze for a second. You're just saying it's not mistaber to say that's the case.
What's the case? It's not that we have an Isser, and through an Isser you got another Isser, and that Isser may have gone away, and that's why I need the Torah to tell you that it doesn't go away. I don't know. It's hard enough to get to this point to say that the whole pasuk came to tell us this one case. But if this one case is an Isser, and it's not even a permissible case. Okay, so we'll leave Max's question out, why we need a pasuk for that. But the point is we have a type of yibum over here of hayil v'ishtari, where the mitzvah would have come later. So I want to address a little bit of what happens in this relationship here. What's going on, and what heter could have gone away. Express it in the question that some of the Mefarshim, the Achronim ask, that let me ask. Let's go to the end of today's daf. Okay, the end of today's daf tells us another important aspect of Yibum, because this will help us clarify how far to take certain aspects of this, of the Zika, of the marriage that gets passed over.
On Amud Beis?
On Amud Beis. We're going to skip to Amud Beis to the end of the Gemara. This is, the Gemara deals with Velakha. The Torah says, Velakak Velakha, he will take her as a wife. So he will take her as a wife. V'yibim v'yabma, and it says he will do yibum to her. So that tells me both the tzara and the erva are going to be prohibited. So Gemara says, what I need this for? Even if there were two marriages, the boy nasiv hai, even if he can marry either one, shari, it's going to be permissible. If not, it's going to be prohibited. The Rabbanan say, what do they need velakha for? They need it for Rabbi Yosef Rechanina. Damar Rabbi Yosef Rechanina velakha malamet shemegarsha beget matzira v'yavma balko. So the first halach, Reuven dies. His marriage goes over to Shimon. Shimon is now has a Yevama here. This Yevama is prohibited to him. Originally, yesterday, before Reuven died, this woman was prohibited to him. Right? His brother's wife. That's a prohibited marriage. Now that he's deceased, there is a mitzvah to marry her. Great. What happens a year later? They did Yibum. It's all good. They went off to live somewhere. And then the marriage doesn't work out and they get divorced. Can he remarry her? Or do we say, no, that's your brother's wife. You had a mitzvah, but that mitzvah is gone. In other words, we're looking at this and we're saying, oh, since the Torah permitted this, or as Aki said, the obligation to marry her permitted the erva, great. But once you divorce her, that erva is gone. That mitzvah is gone. the erva is still there. It's still your brother's wife, your deceased brother's wife. And you divorced her, so the mitzvah's gone. So as Aki said, I had a mitzvah, and that made me supersede the prohibition of the brother's wife. A year later, that marriage fails, you divorce her. Can you remarry her? You shouldn't be allowed to, because you don't have the mitzvah that tells me that it supersedes this erva. Yet, the Torah says, v'lakcha. V'lakcha tells me that even that once you marry her, it's totally your wife. It's totally this person's wife, and he's allowed to divorce her and remarry her like any other person who's allowed to remarry his divorcee, as long as she didn't marry anyone else in between. There was no marriage in between. It's actually a mitzvah to remarry. He's allowed to remarry. Now, why? Aki correctly pointed out that it was based on you have an obligation, and that obligation in the balance of power says that even though there's an Issa Erva, the obligation supersedes it. But now you don't have an obligation anymore. You've already done the mitzvah. Tosfos takes it one step closer. Tosfos says, consummate the marriage, you did the mitzvah, and then you're done. Why can she remain your wife continually? It's a good question.
Can you say that question again?
He has a mitzvah yibum. He does the mitzvah yibum. He marries her. He consummates the marriage. Great, done. The next day, they have to separate because there's no mitzvah anymore. As far as Aki said, the balance of powers, the mitzvah is gone. The erva is still there. It should be over.
Right, but the erva doesn't exist once he has a chiyuv to marry her. Once he marries her.
But he fulfilled the chiyuv. The chiyuv is gone.
Right, but once he fulfills the chiyuv of marrying her, the erva is no longer there. It's now his wife.
So Tosfos says something. Tosfos says it's not mistaber. It's not logical. I don't need a pasuk for that. Tosfos says here on Chesam base in Divrei Hamaschil Melamed, Tosfos says there'll be a shniya letzricha kra. For the second relations, you don't need a pasuk to say that too is permissible. The Svaruhu, it's a logical thing. The Torah wouldn't say marry her so that you can divorce her, right? After one time that they were together, right? But so that's the way Tosfos says it. But Charlie's saying one step more, and I think this is a very important yesod in understanding the structure of yibum. If we have time, I'll show where it plays out in more cases. But what Charlie said was, it's no longer a yibum. At that point, it's his wife. And that's the language that the Meiri uses here on our daf. It's not his brother's wife anymore. It's his wife. So what was the erva? The erva was, it's his brother's wife. Well, your brother's wife is your erva. The mitzvah now says, make yibum. The mitzvah is only for the first step, for doing yibum. Once the yibum is done, it's now consummated. You've finished the marriage. You've taken over completely the marriage, and therefore it's actually not your brother's wife, but it is your wife. And therefore, the rest of it, it's not that I need some sort of logic or some sort of, it's not mistaba, it's not logical. The Torah would say, do the mitzvah and then divorce her. No, actually, the prohibition no longer exists, not on account of the mitzvah. We needed that on step one. Step one, like Aki said, we need the obligation to permit the erva, and that's the balance of power. And a mitzvah makes the erva go away on step one. Step two, it's not that the mitzvah makes the erva go away, because the mitzvah is already done. The erva is not there, as Charlie said, because it's his wife. It's his wife. He took over the marriage completely. It is his. It ishtehu l'chol davar. It's his wife in every way. So
I'm just trying to keep it all straight. This is according to the Chachamim, right? Not this is not in the world of Rebbe who uses the lakcha for something else.
correct. All of Rebbe has an entirely different Yevomos, but this is all in the halacha, like the way we go in halacha. Yeah. So the lakcha tells us that it becomes his wife. To everything, he's allowed to remarry her even afterwards. In Yibum, this really happens also in a nefila shnia. Okay, so nefila shnia means, let's take this wife away. There's only one Arab. There's only one woman. Brother A, Reuven, marries a woman. He dies. Shimon is going to do Yibum. What's the relationship between this woman to Levi, the third brother? Since he's not doing Yibum, this marriage prohibits him. He has a mitzvah. But once they did Yibum, what is she? She's not only this brother's wife, she's also this brother's wife. Forever, the deceased brother's wife. Now, if he dies, right? Now when he dies, he has a mitzvah of Yibum because of this marriage. But he shouldn't be allowed to because this marriage is also, she is his sister-in-law from this marriage, and that there's no mitzvah for anymore because that mitzvah has already been done. You get the question? This woman is his deceased wife. And the deceased man's wife. So when they do Yibum, to him, it's Reuven's wife as much as Shimon's wife. When Shimon dies and he needs to do Yibum, the mitzvah will take away Shimon's marriage, but it can't take away Reuven's. And therefore, he shouldn't be allowed to do Yibum to this woman. This is called Nefila Shnia. When it happens a second time. It falls a second time.
Shouldn't he be allowed to do Yibum? Like, why does it not take away Reuven's marriage? Like, what's...
Because Reuven's marriage is not a mitzvah now.
Reuven's marriage is not a mitzvah. Shimon's is.
I understand, but that's an erva. So how do you know that the Torah says to take away a different erva? It only takes away his erva. How do you know it takes away that erva? That's an erva that's there before this marriage.
But it wasn't an erva before the marriage because it was he could have done the Yibum as well.
But he didn't. When he didn't do the mitzvah, that Eshes Ach remains an Isser. It's Eshes Ach Shelo B'mka Mitzvah is the language of the Gemara. It's his brother's wife without a mitzvah there.
But that Eshes Ach turned into Yibum. The other brother did it. So now he became an Eshes Ach to his second brother, Shimon. If he dies, why not?
I think what you're saying is connected to what you said before. And this is really what the point that I want to point out here is, what happens is he took over that marriage. It's now his wife, but he didn't do Kiddushin. He never went to a chuppah. So how did it become a husband-wife? Because his marriage got passed on to him. So there are no two marriages here. There are two brothers, but it's one marriage to this one woman. He took over that marriage. And therefore, when he dies, there's only one Eshes Ach moving over. Because that's what I think Charlie was saying before. The concept is Yibum makes it not only the initial passing on of the Kiddushin, and then he takes over the marriage. No, the entire thing gets passed over to him. Therefore, there's no prohibition left. There's no erva left. He can divorce her and remarry her. When he needs to do Yibum, he's doing Yibum to his wife. Well, what about this one? That relationship has already been absorbed into here. That's not an independent relationship anymore. There's not an independent marriage. That is completely absorbed here and is going to be absorbed here. That's the structure of Yibum. And this becomes an integral part to another question, an answer to another question that Tosfos asks on Amud Aleph. Tosfos says, going back to our initial scenario, 2 brothers married 2 sisters. That was the case. And we said that we need the pasuk to tell me that you're not allowed to do Yibum in such a case. Great. Tosfos says, what is that? That's an erva of a supreme erva, of a kares. What about a prohibition that's lesser? And this is a very interesting scenario. We have a Kohen whose brother dies. His brother dies. He has a mitzvah of Yibum. But she is a widow. After the Zika happens, he becomes a Nismana Kohen Gadol. There's a Gemara later in Daf Samach Aleph. He gets appointed as a Kohen Gadol. As a Kohen Gadol, he's not allowed to marry a divorcee. Right? Sorry, he's not allowed to marry a widow. His deceased brother's wife is a mitzvah to him. The Zika happened beforehand. Tosfos asks, he should be allowed to marry such a woman. He should be allowed to do the Yibum. Why? He was Nismana to Kohen Gadol. After that prohibition came in, after the Yibum. So over here we had a sister, but without a sister. This guy became Kohen Gadol. Right? So we're putting a choshen on him.
Another question would the marriage go, if he did marry her, would the marriage go away if he became the Kohen Gadol? Same idea.
Right. So we have over here, he's not allowed to marry a divorcee. A widow. He's not allowed to marry a widow. But he has the mitzvah beforehand, and the prohibition of the brother's wife went away already. So that should also take away the prohibition of the Kohen Gadol marrying a widow. So Tosfos says, and the Rishonim say, well, it won't work because that would only work for the initial marriage, for the consummation of the Yibum. It wouldn't work long term because a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to be married to a widow. So we ask, wait 1 second, but you said Hoil v'ishtari ishtari. If this is permissible, this is permissible. And if this is permissible long term, this relationship prohibition, so too the kahuna relationship should be permissible long term. That's the question that we really have to address. What's going on? And here, the Rav Nachum Bertzovitz and many said it in different ways. The concept over here is what this point that Charlie was saying. The permission is only for the initial instant. The mitzvah moment, that, as Aki said, right? The balance of the mitzvah moment, the chiyuv, supersedes and will allow even erva. But once that's gone, that's gone. So then the marriage shouldn't be allowed to continue. No, there he took over a marriage already. He took over the brother's marriage, so he's allowed to continue. But a Kohen Gadol, she's still a widow. The Kohen Gadol can't continue. There's no continual hoil v'ishtari. Once it's permissible, it's permissible, right? Once we permit one prohibition, we permit another prohibition. We're not permitting a prohibition for the remainder of the marriage. There, it's just because it's already his wife. By that will permit this case because he took over the brother's marriage. He is now in place of his brother, and that's the relationship. But as far as the kahuna goes, it's still a divorcee forever. It's still a widow forever, and he cannot continue the marriage. That's the answer to this question. And really,
What if he married her and then became Kohen Gadol?
Sorry?
What if he married her and then became the Kohen Gadol, or it wouldn't be an option?
No, that would be permissible, because that would be permissible because it was never that she was never a widow. She was his wife. But if the other way around is prohibited. So I'm harping on this a little bit because this really is fundamental to understanding the structure of Yibum. The structure of Yibum is such that the deceased brother's marriage is passed on to the living brother in its entirety. He is now taken over that marriage. Ishto hilachal, it's his wife. It's not his brother's wife anymore. It's not in place of his brother, it's him. The initial mitzvah is to be in place of the brother, and now it's his marriage. Okay, we're going to leave that there. We're going to have another few minutes before Mincha, so we're just going to go to Rava's answer. Rava says, no, we don't need it for any of this. Actually, the truth is, we don't need a special teaching of Allah to tell us that you're allowed to marry, that you're not allowed to do Yibum to an Erva. That's obvious. You're right. We wouldn't have needed it for that. So the Gemara says, what does Rava say? Rather, we need it only for the tzaras erva, or really the tzaras tzara of the erva. So I may have thought that it's true you can't marry the erva, but her tzara should be permissible, and therefore we said no. We need allowed to tell you not only her but her sister wife, the tzara as well, and that is a change in. We had 4 blot of Gemara, 4 daf of Gemara, looking at why we needed this pasuk to permit erva, and Rava says that's not what it's coming for at all. So we have two cases of tzara that are possible. We have tzara b'mkom mitzvah and tzara shelo b'mkom mitzvah. What is a case of? So I'm going to diagram that as well. So we have this is, let's start anew, let's leave all this out. Let's start anew. 2 brothers. And this one brother is married to 2 women. He's married to 2 women. This one is his erva, let's say his daughter. This one is tzaras erva. I may have thought this is permissible. He can't do yibum to his daughter, understandably. That's a Torah prohibition. But maybe he's allowed to do yibum to her. Therefore, he says, no, you're not allowed to do yibum. Allah tells us, not only can you not do yibum to her, you can't do yibum to her. Okay? And that's the sister's wife and the erva, whatever it may be. And what's a case of shelo b'mkom mitzvah? Shelo b'mkom mitzvah is these are not brothers. This is just an independent fellow. So he's some guy over here. This fellow marries his daughter. So it's his son-in-law. And his son-in-law takes a second wife. So she is a sister wife to his daughter, to his erva. He divorces her. Is he allowed to marry her? Or he dies. Is he allowed to marry her? It's not a mitzvah yibum, but it's not a relative at all. It's his daughter's husband's other wife. It's his mother's husband's other wife. It's his sister's husband's other wife. It's totally not a relative, but it was in the same marriage as his erva. That, the Torah is saying, that's where we're talking about erva shelo b'mkom mitzvah, tzaras erva. The tzara of erva, but not in a mitzvah case, just in an out there case. That's this case of tzaras erva shelo b'mkom mitzvah. So it's complicated. There's really no relationship here, but that's why I need this pasuk. Okay, I'm going to stop here.